Hello, everybody. So honored to have a very special guest, great researcher. In my opinion, he's part of the Mount Rushmore of researchers, right? Definitely way up there. And that is Smoke Dog. Basically, replace the Q's, or I should say the O's with Q's, and he could be followed over on X. We're going to give him a quick little introduction here on his X, and I want you guys to see it for yourself. So basically, here it is. And he has exclusive research that can be found over on his platform. It's basically, like I mentioned, at Smoke Dog, replace the O's with Q's, and basically is referred to as the smoke, or so I should say, school.com smoke room. I'm just going to share that real briefly with you guys. Here it is. This is some of his premium content. Take a look into it. Some of you guys want some of that premium content. And if anything, join the smoke room. So before we jump more into this, Smoke, if you do us a favor, explain to our audience what the smoke room is all about.
No problem. And first off, definitely thank you for the invitation. Definitely a fan of your platform, and it's always great to see another researcher sharing institutional research, important documentation on ISO assets, and definitely want to say I appreciate you for sharing the message and sharing what I find interesting with the world as well. But as far as the smoke room is my exclusive community where we are basically strategically documenting down the bull cycle from an institutional perspective, and we are using their data, their research, and their publications for our own use for the first time, and I would say investment history, to accurately follow the evolution and adoption of this asset class, but approaching it from an academic perspective and not more so speculative um like social media has taken over the investment realm. Um, Us in the smoke room believe that you can accurately and confidently navigate this market by following the right documentation. And that's what we're doing and positioning ourselves for this bull cycle and beyond with the highest level importance in our documentation. Sorry about that. But I do believe that by following these documentations in our community, we are tracking each and every relevant macro factor of this cycle in a way that hasn't been done before.
So basically, more of what Smoke already does, guys. Bring in those receipts. I appreciate that, and thank you so much again for your kind words. We're going to jump into this outline of what we have for you. Just giving you guys a heads up about the format. We decided not to put everything into one like big long deep dive 1 hour video. You're going to get chunks, segments throughout the week. So tune in every day for those particular segments. And again, how many times have we shared Smoke's research on this channel and some of the other channels that I'm networked with? So, again, quite the honor to have Smoke here, obviously. Let's jump into what we have. I gave Smoke a heads up about this earlier, and I said, hey, man, a while back, basically, to be exact, September 5th, 2024, I had this, and I was like, you know what? I want to start an outline with Smoke. It's basically this. And again, I'll give you guys like an end screen card about this, but this is an hour and a half deep dive. I want to respect Smoke's time. So I decided to cut to the nitty gritty. It was about this, again, curious speculation. Was XRP's price predetermined? This will be a little brief intro. I want you guys to hear this because it comes from a particular document from the Bank of Indonesia. And this, again, is from a payment system and fintech 2019 PDF. Listen to this briefly. We'll jump to Smoke and put it all together and why it matters to you. Here we go. As from Cigar, that a while back in 2016, they, as in Ripple, came up with an experiment with 12 banks that did not have any pre-funding relationship. And that, basically speaking, they looked at some of this, and instead of having a pre-funding relationship with each other, they came to the conclusion that banks and payment providers can leverage digital assets to sort liquidity in real time. And again, they gave a bunch of XRP. Literally says they gave it to them. They gave a bunch of XRP to those first banks and asked them to participate in this experiment to settle using XRP as a bridge asset to connect fiats. Now, years later, I think roughly the next year or 2021, there's reference to this, and it states from like CoinDesk and other sources that there was some particular banks that were holding this in their wallets. Okay, but it was never really disclosed specifically who those banks were. I don't know if that's still because of NDAs, and I'll give you guys some research on which ones I think those are. If managing your crypto feels like solving a puzzle, it's time to switch to Decent Wallet. So just a few taps, you can manage, track, and secure your crypto with unmatched ease. And here's the best part. Grab your Decent Wallet at a discounted price by using the referral link below. Don't miss out on making your crypto experience smoother and more secure. Okay, so bottom line is this. I did give you guys some research a while back about who some of those are and whatnot, but for a while now, I've been wanting to pick your brain, Smoke, about some of this. Do you believe that some of these ones, whether it's Bank of Indonesia and so on, still hold some of that XRP all this time? And will they utilize Ripple XRP, especially after regulations hit? Your thoughts?
So I'm familiar with that experiment between um those major banks and Ripple and XRP. So that was in 2016, where a live trial was performed with R3 Corda and XRP being used to replace the use of Nostro Vostro accounts, which is trillions of dollars of dormant money that um, these commercial banks and central banks would like to utilize for their internal processes and actually save that money instead of using it for cross-border transactions. And that experiment that between Ripple, R3 Corda, XRP, and these major banks that included Bank of America and other major central banks, that experiment was widely successful. And the reviews from the central banks and the participants from an experiment where XRP was held for the first time by these banks and used, and actual money was transacted. That was a successful experiment. And from what I understand from what I've seen of these banks and their participation in the Ripple network, r- these banks have had to hold XRP in that instance in order to take advantage of the full liquidity benefits, the payment efficiencies, the cost efficiencies of using XRP, and having that demonstration using that in that environment where I would say regulations was the current regulations wouldn't interfere with their participation. They were able to see the um, what the true value proposition of XRP as a digital asset for their use cases as financial institutions. Now, when it comes to banks still holding XRP, I would be certain that these banks still hold XRP, as I've seen documentation as well as a part of Ripple's, I would say, business expansion strategy was distributing XRP to key market makers, key gateways and liquidity providers to incentivize the market to utilize the XRP asset. And just to your second question of, are these banks waiting for regulations? Across all the documentation that I've seen along the years, and even recent ones regarding current attitudes uh, um, regarding crypto asset usage in traditional payment systems, regulatory uncertainty has been cited as the number one barrier of preventing these institutions from diving into these altcoins, specifically XRP. And even other documentations have cited regulatory uncertainty has been a driving barrier for preventing institutions from accessing XRP um, as a digital asset as well. So that is certainly, you can certainly deduce that right after regulations are solidified, which is in the near term, um, after stablecoin legislation, market infrastructure bill, these legislations altogether will promote the usage of utility tokens and less speculative tokens. And of course, I've shared many documentation like that on X that supports that assertion.
Yes, you absolutely have. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into a little bit of what Smoke has recently speaking. So, brother, I want to pull this up for you. And basically, let's get into this for just a brief moment. In Smoke's documentation is this particular tab. Let's pull it up. And in the findings, Smoke posted this, I want to say August 27th, 2024. So in reality, it's not super recent, but a lot of this is not necessarily so time sensitive. Some of you guys just want everything to be breaking, but this aged incredibly well. Back to the topic of what we're mentioning. Smoke mentions in the same presentation, major confirmation was given that all the major banks partnered, of course, with Ripple. Smoke also mentions this includes the important institutions like Santander. Some of you guys know them as Banco Santander, Bank of America, Standard Chartered, operating in test mode. Well, where are we at right now? Smoke also mentions if these major banks are still in the testing phase, it means they have not yet fully integrated Ripple's technology into their daily lives, day-to-day operations, etc., etc. This part about price, real price impact for XRP will come once these tests conclude and the banks move to full-scale adoption. This other part I want to highlight. The market may currently be in a wait-and-see mode, with investors holding off on driving up XRP's price until they see clear signs of full adoption, regulatory clarity. And in the highlights, you basically mentioned some of this, which I think is great. I'm going to blow this up a little bit more on the other screen. Smoke mentions this citation where it says Ripple, a new technological approach to interbank cross-border financial transfers. It says works in test mode with more than 100 banks. Again, Santander, the ones you talked about. And I love this part about unlimited scalability, designed to improve existing payment technologies by accelerating exchange operations and facilitating the trade of low liquid assets. Now, before we kick it over to this PDF I've updated Smoke about, Smoke, again, some key things about this, going from that test phase back in 2024 and where we're at now and where we're strategically at here real soon when it comes to regulations. And let's face it, brother, the ISO 222 mandate, the full mandate, the one in November. Some of your key thoughts.
So that presentation that was from Russia, and personally, that was one of my most bullish findings. That was something that was circulating around the community for a while. So I definitely think that that was the first time that was brought to the light, and um, and I knew that when I was sharing that. But the part about these major banks being in test mode on the Ripple network was something that was speculated upon, but that official documentation from a Russian financial institution, or I think it was a academic center, that was some of the most concrete evidence that I've seen that these banks are active participants on the network, but they're not using real money yet. And of course, this was again theorized and speculated upon, but the largest systemically important banks in the world being on the Ripple network in test mode, which of course there's only one other alternative mode from test mode, and that's live mode. Being positioned and ready and having all of the technical infrastructure in place because they trust the technology, they trust the protocol, and most importantly, they trust the XRP blockchain for their internal business transactions in the future when blockchain adoption becomes mainstream, when regulatory clarity of crypto assets become more defined. The fact that these major institutions are ready most likely accumulated XRP, because to interact with the Ripple network, you need to use XRP. So interacting with the network in test mode is strong confirmation of their confidence, and most importantly, their intentions to use the Ripple network in the future, when certain factors are in place, like regulatory clarity, like higher liquidity environments, which is set to take place as the crypto environment improves via regulation, via adoption, and liquidity increases.
Very good. Appreciate that. Everybody, we're going to jump into this next part. Key finding that I also gave Smoke a heads up on. Again, let's get into it. So it's this PDF. I want to share this, okay? So if you're wondering what this is, let's go ahead and share this on screen. It's referred to as a multi-currency exchange and contracting platform. It's a PDF that actually comes from MIT. So the exact citation is going to be economicsmit.edu, 2022, roughly November 2022 particular paper. At the beginning, you see a citation in regard to the IMF, International Monetary Fund. All right, so my bottom line is this. When I read more through this, to me, this pounds home Smoke's research. Because when you do a control F, which is our best friend, especially if you ever gone to college, get the PDF, right? Don't get the full actual book, it saves you time. We see here that you have this reference. We'll actually highlight the top part on 11. Swift was an innovation that created a common standard. Think about that. For messaging payment requests related to the fragmented systems that preceded it. Swift has more recently introduced a basic tracker to let clients know where the request for payment lies in the chain of domestic and international correspondent banks. Now, when you go further down on the page, it says here, most innovations for cross-border payment have focused on payments narrowly. There are cross-border regional systems, for example, PAPS, TSIB in Africa, and so on. But what's interesting is this. Number 15, Visa and MasterCard are global retail cards. Visa Bank to Bank Connect and MasterCard track business payment services, offer business services with Visa Direct for course remittances. And immediately in the citation, again, keep in mind, this is from economics.mit.edu, they say Stellar and Ripple. Now, is that the only mention? No. This other one is just Ripple. And it mentions, for example, actually above it, Enbridge under auspices with the Bank for International Settlements, with the addition of China and Saudi Arabia, now include 4 countries. And again, for example, JP Morgan, DBS, Temasek, Parcher, Santander, just like we showed earlier with Smoke's research, with Ripple, and of course Citibank with the M10. Now, Smoke, I want to point out this real quick, and I'm going to jump back to you. I pointed this out. So many people in this space bring this up constantly, that Ripple, is it going to be enough, especially even Stellar, when we see like 1,500 TPS for banking? Some people feel as though, no, that's going to be a big problem moving forward. People point out you need like thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of TPS. But for me, with the research, I don't have it up right now, the M10 through the Bank of International Settlements shows in documentation that you can do over 1 million TPS, but you have to have a direct partnership with the BIS. But again, when we look at some of the material, some of the documentation, whether it's point out from you or point out literally from MIT or whoever, there's something to be said about this M10 system. More importantly, again, why do they specifically constantly mention Ripple and Stellar? I want to get some of your closing thoughts about that.
So Ripple and Stellar, um, just that phrase in itself is what drove me to expand beyond XRP alone when I first got into crypto assets. When I was doing research on Ripple, it was just a pattern that I consistently um, was seeing of Ripple and Stellar being mentioned together as a pair and exclusively as a pair. And there was even a documentation from I believe DBS Bank on that I posted on X about a presentation of the outlook of the blockchain ecosystem, and Ripple and Stellar was paired together in that presentation as well, and they were labeled as special blockchains. And there's several reasons why banks view Ripple and Stellar as special blockchains, but I would say the number one reason is that they are the only 2 blockchains that create VLT applications to improve the correspondent banking system. There's no other blockchain that is focusing on that, and if they are, they aren't as successful as Ripple and Stellar in improving that system. And also, Ripple and Stellar were documented as blockchains interoperable with the Swift system via ISO 20022 within technical documentations. Just those 2 blockchains as well that are ISO compliant, and as well as IEEE technical standards, Ripple and Stellar consensus mechanisms were mentioned in that as well. And those are both standards. ISO and IEEE are both international technical standards that Ripple and Stellar are cited in. So there's several reasons if you go down the rabbit hole of understanding why Ripple and Stellar are so unique in position for so much success and value growth in the future. And that was the reason why that was a objective reason for me to, I guess, drop any sort of XRP maximalism that existed in me at the time. And that's why I encourage non-maximalism in this space, because there's plenty of reason to diversify money's assets, as they all will dominate in the specific lanes that they are focused on. And Ripple and Stellar will dominate in the payments lane together. And the way that they're cited, mentioned together as a pair, it wasn't something that Stellar wasn't something that I could see leaving behind in my portfolio. And opening my mind and opening my imagination to, Stellar led me down to other ISO assets like XDC, Algorand, HBAR, IOTA, Cardano. These assets also have a long list of adoption, a long list of partnerships and announcements that highlight specifically their value proposition over other crypto assets in the ecosystem, which justify why they deserve a unique amount of attention and a unique amount of capital allocation, as they are positioned and have positioned to receive more market share of the compliant traditional ecosystem of value that will inevitably migrate to the crypto ecosystem.
Yeah, you brought up quite a bit about that, especially the whole topic of special blockchains. And I remember doing a particular piece about that a while back. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap this particular segment up. We talked a lot about Ripple XRP and a little bit of Stellar XLM. On tomorrow's show, we're going to get specifically into Stellar XLM, because Smoke brings the receipts once again on that particular one. Do us a solid if you listen to this entire outline and type in SMQKE as in smoke, and we'll know that you listened to the entire outline. On behalf of myself and Smoke, we'll see you on tomorrow's episode.
Finish it. Smoke wins. Flawless victory. Babality.